All right, we continue. This is Zach Gelb Show right here on 365 Sports. We're continuing our NFL offseason preview as we go through all 32 teams. We did the Raiders yesterday. I think we're just going to go in order of the draft. So today we go with the team that's holding the second overall pick in the draft. They also have another pick at number 16. And we welcome in the biggest Jets fan I know. His name is Jake Asman. He also does a great job covering the Jets as the host of the Jake Asman Show. And in addition to that, working for ESPN Radio in New York. Jake, appreciate it. How are you?
Zach, congrats on the new gig here and an honor to join you.
All righty. There's so many different ways that we could start this conversation. They're not going to be able to trade up to one. The Raiders are going to take Fernando Mendoza. So what are your thoughts right now about 2 months out from the NFL draft and what the Jets should do with the second overall pick?
Yeah, to your point, there's no obvious path for the New York Jets at number 2. It's not like, let's say, last year where you had Abdul Carter, for example, and it's like, oh, you just take the best, non-quarterback in that spot. And it turns out Travis Hunter even went before Carter. It feels like there's some good players in this draft, but there's not that generational can't-miss talent. So it really comes down to, which flavor of, I believe, defensive player the Jets wanted. The 3 names I believe to look at here 2 months out. You look at the 3 pass rushers. They all can kind of do different things. That'd be David Bailey of Texas Tech, Ruben Bain of Miami, and then the last name is Arvell Reese, who's, to me, the most intriguing prospect because he's only 20 years old, and he didn't rush the passer a ton this past year at Ohio State. They used him all over the place as an outside linebacker, and then when they lined him up at edge, he was really efficient if you look at his pressure rate when he got the chance to do it. So I think this early on, it's tough to say where the Jets are leading. There's also that argument of, hey, what about a receiver? Some of these receivers are projected to go around 4, 5, or 6. So could the Jets, who desperately need playmakers next to Garrett Wilson, could they do it as early as number 2? And then the position value debate. Caleb Downs of Ohio State, the star safety who could do a lot on a defense, is too early for a safety. Maybe in a different year it would be, but if he's clearly the best player on the Jets board, would they go down that path? So a lot of options at number 2, which makes it really exciting to talk about because they could go down a ton of different paths.
I do think it's going to be one of the 3 pass rushers. I like David Bailey a lot, and I think that he was just overshadowed a little bit this year by Jacob Rodriguez, but that's also why I think Jacob Rodriguez didn't get an invite to New York, was because you could have just as easily voted for the Heisman David Bailey if you were going to vote for Rodriguez. So we'll see which one out of the 3 they do prefer, but the wide receiver argument, when you have Garrett Wilson there, is an interesting one. Could you take a Jordan Tyson? I guess you could. And also you have Carnell Tate if you want to keep the Ohio State family kind of together with Garrett Wilson. So the wide receiver is interesting, but Downs is going to be a great player. And that's why I think we share the sentiment just the way that you brought it up. I think it's going to be pass rusher, but if they go Caleb Downs at 2, I don't know how a Jet fan could really be upset with that.
Yeah, look, it's tough to sit here and say, how could you take that player when this is a defense, Zach? They didn't have an interception this past year, as embarrassing as that is, right? So they need playmakers. Their safety play was an abomination, and Downs is much more than your typical safety. I had a caller on my YouTube show make a really good point. His name was Ralphie, so shout out to Ralphie on Long Island for this. If you think back to the Kyle Hamilton draft, oh, you can't take a safety, it's too high. Well, let's look at who the Giants that year picked. Similar situation. They took an edge rusher in Kayvon Thibodeau. Would you rather have Kayvon Thibodeau, who's been a good player but not great? It's been okay.
Kyle Hamilton, it's not even close.
Or Kyle Hamilton, right, who went, like 20 picks later or 15 picks later, and he's a 2-time All-Pro, and he's one of the best players, obviously, in the league, regardless of position. So, that's where you could kind of get into a bit of an issue if you're just talking about, oh, you can't take a certain position because, that's not how you build your team. At the end of the day, if your grade on Downs is so much higher than the pass rushers, you almost have to do it just based on how you're building your team and how you're evaluating prospects.
And ultimately, there is not a team in the league right now with how they're positioned that needs to hit their draft picks more than the Jets. And that's why eventually you got to get a quarterback. And I'm fine if they don't take one this year, but eventually you got to take a quarterback. But you got 5 first-round picks in the next 2 years. You better hit on 4 of those, and that's tough to do. Or Glenn's probably gone after this year. We'll get into that. I know you don't like Aaron Glenn, but if Muji doesn't end these next 2 drafts, then he'll be gone.
Yeah, I mean, look, beyond just the 5 ones over the next 2 years, this year alone, Zach, they got 4 picks in the top 44. I mean, you could do real damage rebuilding your team if you hit on 2 and 16 and 33 is a really high pick. It's the first pick of round 2. It's almost an extension of the first round, then pick 44 as well. So they have a lot of resources. Over the next 2 years, they have more salary cap space than just about any team in the league with the draft pick. So, they're set up, head coach aside, they're set up to really rebuild this roster. And that's why, what they do at 2, maybe in another year you wouldn't take Downs, but if you take Downs at 2 and then you come around at pick 16 and take Mekhi Lemon or take Sonny Styles or take another stud premier defensive player that's there, you could really set your team up. I think you have to really just make sure you're getting damn good football players with these picks for the reasons you outlined.
All right, let's go into the Jake Asman show. Let's say it's draft night. At 2, they take whoever. Then 16 comes around. The commissioner walks out there and he goes, with the 16th pick in the 2026 NFL draft, the New York Jets select Ty Simpson, quarterback, Alabama. Your reaction, go.
We're booing, Zach. I don't know if you can hear me. We're booing through it. I mean, I would be so disgusted if the Jets did that for a myriad of reasons. The biggest is I don't trust this coaching staff to properly develop a quarterback. Ty Simpson's made 15 career starts. If you look at the history of first-round quarterbacks that have been taken with less than 20 starts since 2011, it's just Cam Newton who really had true success with the team that drafted him. So that's the first thing. The second thing is everyone says that Ty Simpson needs to sit and develop. I don't know if he has that opportunity with the New York Jets. They got off to a bad start with, Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins, whoever their veteran is that they have. They're going to go to the rookie before he's ready. That's just what happens in the NFL, especially when a coach is trying to save his job and playing the rookie and hoping he shows something might be the way to get another year. I just don't think the Ty would be set up for success. And say they do actually give him this year of development. Well, how many games are you winning next year? And then you got a new coach coming in. You got the 3 first-rounders in 2027 where you're set up in a much better quarterback class. Arch Manning, Julian Sayin, Lenoris Sellers. Obviously, Dante Moore could be a factor a year from now after going back to school. I just don't think it makes sense for the Jets to do it. They got to find a way to win games, show competency, and earn the right, if you're Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji, to take that big swing at quarterback in 2027. Doing it with Ty Simpson at 16, I just think you'd be setting the kid up for failure, and he wouldn't be the guy a year from now anyway, in my mind.
Were you devastated when Dante Moore said he was going back to Oregon?
I was thrilled. I thought it was great because, again, for the same reasons I don't want Ty, you could say very similar things about Dante Moore. He's only made 20 career starts. He's a guy that clearly needs some development. He said it himself. And whether or not he did it to avoid the Jets or not, I think financially he's going to end up regretting that decision. But from a Jet standpoint, I think most Jet fans I've spoken to were aligned in saying this team's not ready to draft the quarterback second overall. It feels like a Zach Wilson situation all over again. They need to build their team and prove that they have the right coach and coaching staff in place now to do that for a young quarterback going forward. It's drafting Dante Moore. Very similar things I just said about Ty Simpson, I think apply for him as well.
Jake Asman, when you look at who you think your opening day quarterback is going to be when week 1 does roll around in September, what's your best educated guess right now?
I have a weird feeling they're going to trade for someone. It's not going to be Mac Jones. I've seen some speculate. I can see Jacoby Brissett being the guy they bring in, kind of replicate a situation where you have him as the veteran. Maybe they sign a guy who's a little younger who might have some sort of upside. The name to watch, I'll throw 2 names at you, Sam Howell or Will Levis, guys who were, thought to be maybe full of potential, but it hadn't panned out. So those are the 2 quote unquote vets you have. And then, you go out there and you take a chance on day 3 or day 2 of the draft with Garrett Nussmeier or one of those quarterbacks who doesn't go round 1 or round 2, but is just there. Cole Payton from North Dakota State. Taylon Green from Arkansas, someone like that I could see, being a guy the Jets add to the room. And it's almost like the Giants quarterback room from a year ago where you had the 2 veterans and then they made the move for Dart. I don't think the Jets would make the move in the first round for the quarterback, but I could see them taking a quarterback with one of their 2 second-round picks, or maybe if they move out of one of their second-round picks, Zach, they acquire a third-round pick, which they don't have, and they do it in that round.
I think you'll call me crazy for this, and I would have called myself crazy for it if I said it a week ago, but actually giving it more thought and then seeing it projected, I don't think it's crazy. With only 2 years left on that contract for Kyler Murray, and I don't like his attitude at times. There's work ethic problems. He's been banged up, and he hasn't reached his full potential. But if it's Jacoby Brissett or if it's like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr, if you could trade a 4th-round pick for Kyler Murray, wouldn't you take that risk if you're the Jets?
Here's the issue with that, though, right? You're taking on his contract, which is enormous. If you could bring in Kyler Murray for nothing, if he's released because they can't find a trade partner, okay, you bring in Kyler Murray and maybe someone else, and then you kind of have a competition there. Just handing Kyler Murray the job when, to your point, he's been banged up. You question whether or not he's all in on football. He's the only quarterback I've ever seen that had a clause in his extension that he had to study film. So there's just some things that concern me. Plus, he's 5'10", and anyone you talk to about what Frank Reich, the new OC, wants in a quarterback, he wants a quarterback who's at least 6'2" and weighs a certain amount, and that's not Kyler Murray. Now, you could say, well, Frank Reich had Bryce Young. He did, but that didn't go so well until Frank Reich, of course, was fired in the middle of that season. So I just don't think it's a great fit for the Jets. If they're just betting on talent and that's the move, okay, but I wouldn't trust Kyler Murray to stay healthy. Playing on the MetLife turf concerns me. There's just a lot there that I think would be concerning if you're the Jets.
I look at Aaron Glenn, and I understand why the Jet fan was excited when they made the hire. He's one of their own, and he was a coach that was established as a defensive coordinator, so I could understand the sentiment. But here are the two things I couldn't stand with him in his first year. He was acting like he was Belichick at the podium before he even won a game. And then also, like you said, you're this defensive-minded genius. Your team couldn't get an interception all year. I know you wanted him gone. I agree. They should have won and done him. Like, look at my team. I don't love firing a coach after 1 year. You knew Gerard Mayo wasn't the guy. You get rid of Gerard Mayo. Boom, you get Mike Vrabel. I'm not saying the Jets would have been in the Super Bowl, but look at the drastic improvement that the Patriots have. Your point of contention with Glenn is what?
Well, I mean, I just don't think you could point to one thing he does really well as a head coach. It's like become a meme on Jets Twitter. But seriously, like I asked Jet fans who try to defend him, what do you say are his strengths of a coach? I mean, when he was asked for some of the positives of the season, Zach, he lamented the fact that they didn't have a kick that was blocked all year on field goals. I mean, that like you're really grasping at straws when you win 3 games, and that's one of the positives you're coming up with. I think the team quit on him at the end of the year. The defense was terrible. He was supposed to be a guy that was going to hire a great coaching staff. That's what Mike Tannenbaum said when he recommended him. He said he'd hire a great staff. That's what the Jets were putting out there. And him and Hugh Jackson are the only coaches over the last 25 years that fired their coordinators after just a year. I mean, you have 10 of the 21 assistants from last season that have been replaced. So I can't point to anything he does well. He didn't call plays on defense. Maybe that gets better now that he's doing it. It can't be worse than what we saw with Steve Wilkes, but he wasn't that great in Detroit. There was one really impressive year, his last year there, where he did a good job as the DC. It's tough to find anything that you could say, yep, well, at least we have this. He's great at designing this, or guys are playing hard for him, or he made great staffing hires. You could point to one great hire. The special teams coordinator, Chris Banjo, was awesome. That's about it. So that to me is my biggest thing. It's like, what exactly does he do well as a coach that you could point to? For all the issues Robert Saleh had, for example, at least we saw real player development on defense. At least we saw a defense that was competitive. He won 7 games, 2 straight years with Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Joe Flacco, Mike White, Trevor Siemian as his quarterback. It's just tough to sit here and really find anything to grasp onto with Aaron Glenn.
You're unapologetically yourself, which is a great thing and what you need to be in this business. But sometimes when you get surrounded, I'm not saying you do this, I'm actually giving you a compliment here. So I know it's going to sound bad at first, but sometimes when people get surrounded by people that make decisions, or that when they interview people, they're not as outspoken as they are if that person's not there. You're doing a weekly radio show in football season with Mike Tannenbaum. You can't stand Aaron Glenn. He's the guy that hired him. What was that dynamic like? Because I saw some of the clips, and to your credit, you didn't hold back at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, I pride myself on being authentic, much like you, Zach, and that's what I've always really respected about the career you've had. I just try to call it how it is, right? Like at the end of the day, what I love about radio the most is that you don't have to be like unbiased, right? You get to still be a fan. Like we love sports talk radio, and now this platform here that I have on YouTube and what you're doing now with 365, you get to be a fan. You get to give opinions. I try to be a knowledgeable fan, but I got to be honest. And if I'm going to be really critical on my YouTube show or on radio shows that I'm doing of Aaron Glenn, and then I do a weekly show with the guy who helped recommend him, and I don't say the same thing, I'm being disingenuous. I'm not being honest with the audience. So it was a little awkward at times. I happen to like Mike a lot. I think he's a really good guy. Sometimes we'd get into it, it'd get heated, but at the end of the day, when we talked about topics that weren't the Jets, we were talking Giants or previewing the big games that day, the show went really well. So there were some moments where there was some tension, and it made for some, I thought, entertaining radio. But at the end of the day, Mike has his opinion, I have mine, and I thought it made a really good show.
When you get to Breece Hall, are they going to franchise tag him? That's what it seemed like the talk was in the last day or two.
So I'd be surprised if they just let him walk for nothing. I think the debate is, do you either extend him, or which type of franchise tag do you use? You could use the transition tag, which is a little less than what the franchise tag would cost, but there's different arguments for each one. I would be surprised if they just let him walk, though, because they had reportedly a 4th-round pick on the table at the trade deadline, and they chose to not take it. They said either make it a 3rd. This was Kansas City, I believe, as the team. And the Chiefs said nope. So they just kept Brees. And then the way Darren Muji spoke about Brees at the end of the season press conference, he was talking about Brees as if he was going to be on the team in 2026. So just based off that and not anything publicly changing to my knowledge, I think he's going to be on the team. He might not be thrilled that he's tagged and not extended, but that's in the CBA. The Jets' right to do it. And I think they have so many other holes. Why not just keep Brees, who had over 1,000 yards and is a good player, keep him around for another season and figure it out then?
I had a similar conversation about the Raiders, and it's like, all right, you're building from the ground up, which is not foreign territory for either of those franchises, but it's like, all right, who are your pieces that you're building with? And for the Raiders, obviously, it's going to be Mendoza. You got Genti. You got Bowers. We'll see what happens with Max Crosby. Colton Miller's going to be a player there. Like, outside of Garrett Wilson and, Breece Hall, running backs are expendable. And I do tend to agree that they're going to try to keep him back because then you would have traded him by the deadline. Like, who are your Jets players, not that you view as untouchable, but that you feel confident about building with for the future with this team?
What's ironic about their team, Zach, they actually have a really good offensive line. And typically teams like the Raiders, for example, their O-line's horrible. Like, the Jets were bad with a good O-line, which is like almost impossible to fathom, but that's life as a fan of the Jets. They have 2 really good offensive tackles. Their 1st-round pick from a year ago was arguably, their best player on the team for a lot of weeks. And Armand Membu, he was awesome at right tackle. Olu Fashanu from Penn State, he was a 1st-round pick 2 years ago. He really did a nice job in his 2nd season, looked like an ascending player for sure. Joe Tippmann, their center/guard, who moved over to guard this year because AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, went down on the Tuesday before week 1. So he slid over to guard and looked really good. You look at their line, you got 3, I think, foundational pieces there that you feel good about. So I think you have Garrett. If they bring back Brees, he's another name, and you feel good about the line. And there's some other nice pieces, but I think if you're a Jet fan trying to find some positives, you have Garrett, you have the good O-line. Let's say they keep Brees. Mason Taylor looked pretty good as a rookie and limited opportunities at tight end. He should be better in year 2. It's not actually the worst starting point for any quarterback they bring in. It's just the questions about the coach, the defensive issues, all that. But I think you feel pretty good about the offensive line going into another season with that group together.
I can't stand Derek Carr. He's just one of those players for some reason I just never have liked. And a lot of it is the woe is me and the drama stuff. And now he's on his podcast one day saying how much he loves the Jets fan and loves Aaron Glenn. The next day, I'm only going to play if I go to a team that wins a Super Bowl. Like, buddy, you haven't ever won a playoff game in your career. I don't really think after a year away you're entitled to make these demands. Can you see Carr happening? Because a lot of times players say they want to win a Super Bowl and they go to a destination where it's like, okay, you're not going to win a Super Bowl there.
I could see it happening. And I agree with you. I thought it was laughable that he's like, I'm only coming out if I'm going to go to a team that's ready to win. Like, okay, so you want to be a backup for, Matthew Stafford next year? Like, there's not that many opportunities for Derek Carr to go to a team where they're like, yep, we're Derek Carr away from winning a Super Bowl. So if he wants to play, yes, I think the Jets could make some sense for him. And, they could protect him. He's had injuries in the past. We just talked about the Jet O-line. He's not my favorite option. And for some of the things you said, I agree. But, I mean, look, beggars can't be choosers. The options out there, they're not great in the draft and in free agency. That's why these guys are available in the first place. But, yeah, if Derek Carr thinks that any team's going to sign him that's going to have a chance to win a ring, I mean, he's a little delusional there.
I know it's so early. We haven't even done the combine yet. There hasn't been a draft. There hasn't been free agency. Do you think, though, Aaron Glenn will make it through the season coming up in 2026?
Do I think he makes it through the season? I'll say yes. I'm not overly confident in that because if they get off to a terrible start and their schedule, at least on paper, and we know things change, is not exactly the easiest in the world when you look at their opponents. But I'll say yes, only from this standpoint. I don't think they're going to be very good, but I think Woody Johnson knows that if he fires another coach in season, it just continues to kind of feed the narrative of how dysfunctional the Jets are. And while he probably would be justified if he did it, especially if the Jets start 0-7 again for the second year in a row, I think the fact that they didn't fire Adam Gase at the end of that second year, they knew he was dead coach walking. If they give Glenn the year, you can move off easily after 2 years. And, there's not going to be 10 openings in the league next year. The Jets, with their 3 first-round picks, a lot of cap space, maybe an opportunity to draft the top quarterback a year from now or get one of the top quarterbacks. I think it would be a relatively attractive job among the openings. So I think Woody maybe keeps Glenn, doesn't try and do anything that would make the Jets look dysfunctional, and potentially hurt the reputation further of being able to get Mike Tomlin or Sean McDermott or Shane Steichen, Kevin O'Connor, whoever the top guys are a year from now that we're talking about.
Just to swoop back in, and then we'll let you run, Jake Asman. Favre, Rodgers, do you think he's going to pull a Favre and eventually find his way to Minnesota this offseason, or do you think he's back with the Steelers? And how about Robert Saleh landing in Tennessee and bringing in Dable as his OC?
So I think Rodgers is going to play, and he's going to play for McCarthy for one more year. If I were him personally, I think he should retire. I don't think anything good could happen of coming back for another year. He made the playoffs. He didn't end poorly with his jet run, 10-7. Made it back to the postseason. I thought that was a decent way to go out at age 42. But I think he's going to want to play again for McCarthy. So I think that's going to happen there. And as far as Saleh, I'm kind of mixed on Saleh. I could see a scenario where it works out. The OC hire was so important for him. I think getting Brian Dable is encouraging. We'll see if they could turn Cam Ward into something, because that's really what it comes down to. I have no doubt Saleh will get that defense fixed and they'll be a lot better there. But it really comes down to the quarterback, because Saleh, he's not going to help you elevate anything on offense. So it's all about the OC hire and his quarterback. If Cam Ward hits, I think he could be successful. If Cam Ward doesn't hit, he's going to struggle, and he's not going to last more than a couple seasons.
You can check him out on YouTube. He's the host of the Jake Asman Show. Also, you can check him out if you're in the New York area locally on ESPN New York. Jake, appreciate you previewing the Jets with us. Thank you.
Anytime, Zach. We'll do it again soon, I'm sure.